Welcome to the Build It Better podcast. I'm your host, Robert Johnson, and we are thrilled to go north of the border finally. I think we've gone to a lot of places north of the border we haven't done. So we are joined today by Arden Styles, and Arden is the Chief Commercial Officer with Seed Homes. Now, bear with me just a second, Arden, because I want to get this in. I usually pitch it to you to say, tell us about yourself, but I want to share this first, and then I'm going to pitch it to you to tag. Arden is a professionally certified executive with over 25 years of experience in transforming and improving operations in customer-focused organizations. So your expertise is in assessing complex business challenges, formulating creative solutions, executing effectively, specializing in compelling brand, marketing strategy, business transformation, strategy development, execution, program management. We could go on for the next 30, 45 minutes. And on top of all of that, he was featured in the Top 100 Canadian Professionals magazine 2023 edition. It's not like saying that and saying 1977 edition, you know? I mean, this is recent. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. Now tell us who you really are and what you really do.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, Robert. I know it's quite a mouthful, but I'll just summarize what I do right now. So I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Seed Homes. And what that does is it's all about the responsibility of creating value for the enterprise, generally speaking. But I handle all the marketing and the social media and the outreach and any commercial arrangements that the organization is considering entering into. So that's what falls under my portfolio.
Now, I was privileged enough to come up, I believe it was in February. I should have looked at my calendar, but I think it was in February. We didn't get to meet, but I met with several members of your team, got a chance to kind of tour the old facility, and I understand you've recently moved into a new place. I assume it's bigger?
Yes. So the first facility about 17,000 square feet, and the second facility is about 22,000 square feet.
Perfect. Yeah, it was a little bit cramped in the old one. You were moving some things around outside, had cranes in the parking lot. It was a bunch happening. It was an exciting visit. Now, before we get into your product, let's jump into a couple of things. Unless our listeners and viewers have been living under a rock the last year or two, affordable housing it is the buzzword or buzz phrase, and that means a lot of things to a lot of people. And I get into debates with people all the time about what really is affordable housing, which is another topic for another time. But I love your model, and you are actually Seed Homes is if I use the term a modular home builder, would that be correct?
That's correct, Robert. We are considered a modular home builder, but it's not a mobile home. So there's no rebuild or anything like that. So modular simply means that we can build the home in stages, off-site in a facility, and then we bring them to the end owner's site, and it's assembled there. It's basically packaged and placed on the site. And we can get into those details. But the insurance companies, the banks, you can get a mortgage on these homes like anybody else, and they're considered a modular home. But the big thing to understand is that once they're on site, they're fixed to the site.
Correct.
So you can't leave with them overnight. A mobile home, you could do that. But
yeah, or what they used to call manufactured home, which I think was kind of the making it more palatable than saying mobile home. But basically, the mobile home, manufactured home has to have axles. It has to stay on all of those pieces and parts have to stay on as part of that structure. Modular building is exactly the opposite in that you're bringing something on site and putting it on a permanent foundation on permanent piers or footings.
That's correct. And they're hooked up to utilities. Our homes can be completely off-grid if you require, but they can be hooked up to utilities, electricity, sewer, water with no problem.
And I've got to tell you that it's a very impressive. I've seen a lot of modular buildings, and there's a lot of people trying to do a lot of different things,
Sure.
trying to get creative. One of the biggest problems, or I say problems, that's the wrong word. One of the biggest challenges in the modular building space is logistics. How do I build something big enough to make it comfortable for a family and
Yes.
still be able to transport that thing cost effectively down the road and to be able to get it onto your site? You
Correct.
guys have an interesting solution.
Yes, and it's very timely that we're discussing this today, Robert, because literally 2 hours ago, we had a home delivered to an owner's site. I just reviewed the videos, and it just happened. The interesting thing is that this home was in our facility this morning. It was shrink wrapped, loaded on a truck, and it arrived on site within 2 hours, just like that. But what makes our homes different, Robert, is that we've designed it in such a way that the weight of the home, so when I say the weight, you've got the full-size kitchen and bath, full-size appliances. These aren't tiny little appliances. These are full-size residential appliances. Those are located in what we call the utility corridor, which is the central part of the home. That's where all the weight is. And we have a steel skeleton that goes around that as a structural element. Then we've built steel walls that actually fold up into this central utility corridor. Once it's folded, it is now shipping compliant. It's not an oversized load. So we can put anywhere from a 400 square foot home, living space, up to a 1,200 square foot home on the back of a truck or a train or a ship. So we're getting interest internationally because of the fact that we can ship these intermodally.
Yeah.
And the walls unfold to create a huge living space, 1,200 square feet, and up to 10-foot ceilings on the inside.
Yeah. It's really, when when you step into one and get to walking around, it's really, it's large. You don't have the, and I'll do the air quotes, tiny home feel. It feels like a legitimate home. Now I'm going to ask a question. I'm not going to share too much, but is this the second home to the person who bought the first one that was a studio?
That's correct. That's correct. So they have a site. It's right downtown, one of the southern Alberta municipalities here up in Canada. And we've achieved all the permitting requirements with no problem. Mm-hmm. And they're putting 2 seed homes on the same lot. Yeah. And so a lot of people ask, why are they doing that? Well, the first seed home is that's their primary residence. The second home on the lot will be the artist studio. So
that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're also going to Airbnb out that second space.
Oh, that's amazing.
They have an income generating property or location right where they live. And they're 2 seat homes. So it's a very versatile installation for them.
Now, I failed to mention you are in the Calgary, Alberta, Canada area. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. We truly are in a housing crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take a lot to get around. Now, I think our housing crisis and our homeless crisis, I think, are 2 different crises that we tend to intermingle. A lot of people say, well, we've got this huge home. If we had enough homes, we'd get them all off the streets. It's not exactly what's going on here, but Canada has a housing crisis as well. And I believe Canada is doing some very progressive things with the government freeing up some monies for factories, for people, incentives to really get into this and start churning out some housing. Am I correct there? Can you elaborate a little bit about what Canada is specifically doing for the housing crisis?
Yes. So from a federal level, the federal government has announced millions and millions of dollars in funding to assuage the housing crisis. Now, they don't necessarily fund particular manufacturing facilities or companies, but they fund organizations across the country that are part of the infrastructure to address the housing crisis. In addition, just about every major city across Canada, they're changing their regulations. So I received a letter in the mail as recently as last week from the city council where I live here. And now they're proposing increasing density, lowering restrictions, and this making it easier to put laneway homes, as an example, in your backyard.
Correct.
And our smallest model, the studio model, is perfect for laneway application. And the other thing too is that because the regulations are now changing, it's easier to get the permit. It's more accepted to get the permit. Our homes are built with a sloped roof as well. Mm-hmm. That's very important. So that's the first thing they look at from a regulatory perspective, because in Canada, you got snow, wind, rain, hail. If you have a flat roof, you're not going to get an approval. But our roofs are delivered a 1/12 slope roof. So that's one of the other unique aspects of our design.
Yeah. So there's some similar things happening here with what we're referring to more as an ADU, or an accessory dwelling unit here. And the same thing, municipalities are really starting to loosen up setbacks and things of that nature, so that we can get things in and open up some viable housing solutions. Now, a modular home, and I think certainly as it pertains to what you folks do, they're inspected on site. So you have building inspectors that come in and will inspect the electrical, the plumbing, and all those things before you close it up. So you're not bypassing any of these things that municipalities require and that are there for building safety. You're just doing them in a controlled environment when you can do it 24 hours a day, regardless of wind, rain, snow. Makes no difference. Am I correct there?
You're absolutely correct. And we've already passed all the inspections. All our homes are completely certified, and they qualify for a new home warranty, just like a traditional build. But what happens is now the governments are saying they have to do something different, because there's simply not enough labor force to build traditionally built homes. They're just not out there to meet. So this type of modular approach can help increase the supply of available homes, number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, our homes are about a third of the price of a traditional stick build. Mm-hmm. A third of the price, and that there's various reasons for that we can discuss. They're also made out of steel, Robert. So there's no wood in these homes at all. So there's nothing that'll rot. There's no mold. There's no drywall, so you don't have to paint, mud. There's nothing like that. Nothing goes in the landfill. The entire home can be recycled.
Correct.
So the fact that it's completely recyclable, that you can ship it, and it's a third of the price, is highly attractive to the market, but also our suppliers and also various government agencies as well. It's a different approach. If you just take a look at the forest fires that have devastated northern Canada recently,
did you say
our homes are not fireproof at all?
You froze for just a second. So did you say that wildfires has been an issue?
Wildfires is a huge issue in Canada in general, but certainly in northern Canada. Mm-hmm. So if you have homes that are built out of wood, those things they'll burn to ash.
Right.
Now, our homes are not fireproof. However, because they're made of steel, the flames will roll over it. You might get some charring, but they're not going to burn to the ground.
Correct.
So the government and municipalities and towns and cities are saying, we have to think about things differently now. I mean, the climate change, all that stuff, we have to think about things differently. The cost of houses is going like this, but mm-hmm. income staying like that, flat mm-hmm. or going down. Mortgage rates are going up as well. So, mm-hmm. so the gap between what you're earning versus what you can afford has never been greater, right? So you combine that with the lack of supply, that is what's creating the housing crisis.
You bring up some really great points that I get questioned on often. I just had this question last week about home loans. I mean, they were like, "Oh, this is all great." I'm constantly banging the drum for light gauge steel to be used in construction, and people were saying, "Okay, well, I understand traditional, but do banks loan on this kind of thing? And modular, do banks loan?" I said, yes. Matter of fact, they want to loan on these. They have much more. They have less risk in financing or providing funding for this type of a home than they do for building the traditional or funding for traditional, stick built, lumber built buildings.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's I've got I'm taking a little bit of heat today from a LinkedIn post where I have an old woman sitting on a porch and the house is falling down around her, and an old woman sitting out in front of a perfectly pristine home. And I'm asking, which one would you put Granny in? It's a tongue-in-cheek attempt to make people think Really?
Yeah.
Now I get, and you've already touched on it, and I love the way you put it too. And I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna tell you up front. But they're always like, look, okay, great. So but the cabinets are metal and you've got wood inside, and well, absolutely you do. There is a place for lumber in construction, but you made the point, and I've always said, light gauge steel structures, no, they're not going to burn. They might get so hot they twist and melt and come down, but you're going to have enough time, if it's that bad of a fire, to
That's
get
correct.
out of it. It's not going to go up so fast that it's a total loss. But I love the fact about the fire rolling over it, because that really is truly what the fire would do when they don't have anything combustible to continue igniting. They're just going to pass on and go on to the guy that's next door that built with stick.
Well, that's true, Robert. If you think about what happened in Maui
Mm-hmm. Great
recently,
example.
it just burned to the ground. So if they were to rebuild using traditional wood products, you can do that, but it's going to happen again. It's only a matter of.
And we see this in California right now with major insurance companies that are pulling out and saying, we're not doing it anymore. State Farm, Allstate, those. That's exactly what happened there in Hawaii. They said, look, folks, we've done this enough. I mean, 2-3 times, we're done. If you're going to build back and you're going to build combustible, we're not going to insure you.
Exactly.
So
we're seeing that as well. We are
those kinds of things. It's like, it makes my head explode when you get into the argument with people. Now, you brought up another point, and I've got to tag onto it.
Sure.
You said that your home is 1/3 the cost of a regular home.
On average, correct.
Okay, on average.
Yeah.
Let's call it half, just for the sake of it. Let's say it's half the cost. I don't care. Let's call it a quarter of the cost. But it's built with steel. It's built with light gauge steel. You even you have a light gauge steel, and you can do other things, I understand. But for siding, like when I look at your website, you have a light gauge steel or panel.
It's 22 gauge steel.
There you go.
Absolutely, yes.
But how can it be cheaper when steel and light gauge steel is more expensive than wood?
Right. So we get that question a lot, Robert. It's a great question.
Yeah.
The first thing is that the steel itself. So we run the steel through a panel former, which creates the form of the panels of the steel, and that steel is fastened together to create the rigid structural integrity of the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, there is very little internal structure required. So you're taking out all that cost of having to put in all this internal structure. That comes out. That's not in there. And then the other thing too is the way it's assembled. It's just so strong and rigid because we have an industrial heritage.
Mm-hmm.
We build these types of enclosures for gas compressor stations. So if you can enclose a 1,500 horsepower Caterpillar engine
mm-hmm.
that runs 24 hours a day after day for decades, and handle all the inflows of air and the exhaust coming out, keep the elements out, hurricanes, winds, earthquakes, all that stuff. If you can take that kind of design DNA and apply it to a residential structure, you're really onto something. So that's what we have done.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not full of marble. It's not full of fancy fixtures or anything like that. The fixtures are beautiful. The finishing is gorgeous.
Oh, they are. They're very, very nice.
It's beautiful, yeah, and you can see on our website. But we don't put stuff in there that adds unnecessarily to the cost.
The other thing is speed that we're really not talking about here. Although, this is what I tell people all the time: is light gauge steel, the material component itself, more expensive than lumber? Yep, a little bit. We're getting closer and closer, but it varies. It gets farther away. But yeah,
yes,
it's not a material that we're talking about here. It's a process that we're talking. Right. And when you panelize, when you are building off-site, the labor that it takes to build that home, construct that home, is much less than the labor that's needed when you're building traditionally. So although the material might tip the scale a little bit higher, you are chewing it up with reduced labor. You're chewing it up with reduced insurance costs. it continues to, and then from there, all the efficiencies that it builds in for your other components.
That's right,
It
Robert.
just continues to tip the scales in the favor of a light gauge steel frame designed home. I don't know any other way to say it. You also have a lot of glass designed into some of yours.
Yes. So we wanted to make sure that the interior of the homes have a light, airy, modern feel.
Yeah.
So when you go into the home, the ceilings can be up to 10 feet high. Mm-hmm. So you walk in and it's a huge cathedral-like feeling, and plenty of natural light. So all the natural light comes in. You get this big, airy, spacious feeling. The other thing to note is that because we use the central utility corridor, when you unfold the walls, that living space, there's no post or anything in the middle. So it's like a bowling alley. So you just get this one long, wide, contiguous space. It can be up to 40 feet long.
Yeah,
so 40 feet on one side, 40 feet on the other, and then the utility corridor. You can have up to 3 bedrooms and 2 full-size bathrooms.
It truly is.
And all of that can be folded and placed on a truck.
That's about the size.
And shipped down the highway. It takes about 8 weeks to build a
single family residential home, starter home for sure. Or what I love the fact is I'm at the age where my kids are all gone, a empty nester home, but you actually fill that space in the middle for that small family as well. So
that's correct. And these can also stack, Robert. We can stack these. So you can put one home on the bottom and then one on the top. And now you've got a cavity here for a garage. We have those designs as well.
Correct. Thank you. I did have that written down to mention, because that is really an interesting looking floor plan that I think is going to go places. The one thing that I really want to talk about, which I think is really exciting, and is the fact when you mentioned it could be off grid. One of the things, and I didn't dig into it as much as the first time as I have the last few days because it was so intriguing. But you have rain harvesting capabilities. You'll have solar panels that you can put on top. You have, power storage components and pieces and parts that you can put on here. Touch on that a little bit, because I think that's really a differentiator.
Yes, absolutely, Robert. So we get a lot of inquiry from off-grid applications. So it could be somebody that owns a piece of land by a lake or whatever it may be, and there's no utilities. We have an option for that. We can put solar panels on the ceiling, on the roof, and a water collection system inside the skid underneath the home. So what happens is when it rains, gravity feeds the tanks underneath the home, and then that tank fills up and then is filtered by a charcoal or UV light. And then you can use it for potable domestic consumption or just to water the garden, for example. That's technology that exists. We've already got it supplied out. There's nothing magic about that at all. It's just we are using that application in a novel way. You can even have a chemical toilet or hook it up to a septic tank. So I field inquiries like that every day.
Yeah, just really amazing stuff. I mean, people try to do it, and when people do it, it looks like it was added on. It looks like, okay, yeah, we can do it, and then they bolt it onto the outside. They've got all this, but to be able to incorporate this inside your panels, it's amazing. What have we not talked about that is something that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so one thing to note about the seed homes is that they're suitable for any climate, Robert. So we have designs that are going as far away as the Arctic. Wow. You can have R28 in the walls, R28 insulation, R31 in the roof. We have complete HVAC systems, heated floors, air conditioning. If you'd like on-demand hot water, you can have that too. These are some of the optional extras. Mm-hmm. We also have inquiries from down to the equator, down to Australia. We have inquiries from Dubai. So the question is it multi-climate applicable? The answer is yes. We simply design to where it's going. So maybe the insulation of the wall needs to be changed depending on the application. Sure. But it's engineered to handle any climate. Well, the other thing I should mention too, Robert, is that we're getting interest in flood areas. So the southern states, Louisiana, along the Gulf Coast, because the homes can be placed on piles 3 feet off the ground, secured, as long as the water doesn't go above 3 feet, you should be fine. But the recent floods in Dubai, they had so much water. Yeah. All the homes that were built on the sand, they got completely destroyed.
Yeah.
So we're getting a lot of interest from that area of the world now because they realize that climate change it's happening.
Sure.
So now they have to have design options that are off the ground so that the water can flow underneath it. And we have the solution for that as well.
Yeah, that's just it really is cool stuff. Man, I'm so glad that we connected and had a chance to chat a little bit. How do people get in touch with you if they have questions or would like to dig into this further?
Yes. So our website is seed-homes.com. So seed is SEED-homes.com. SEED stands for Sustainable Environmental Economic Dwelling. That's how I came up with the name. If you'd like to contact us by email, the email is unfoldwithus@seed-homes.com. Unfoldwithus@seed-homes.com.
That's a neat email address. I would also encourage folks to go to that website. Very, very well done. Tip of the cap to you. I'm telling you, it really is. If it doesn't get your attention by the time you get to the bottom of that homepage, your attention's just broken. There's just you've got a problem.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'll tell your listeners, if you go, you'll see how there's videos on there of how the home actually unfolds.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to, there's also a tour of an actual owner, the couple, an owner walking through their actual seed home, so you can see what it looks like on the inside when it's all furnished.
Yeah, and I would encourage everybody to do so because it really is. Although it's very prevalent right now and people are getting bombarded with this from left and right, and especially here, the tiny home movement, and people have gone to the home shows and they see the tiny homes. Folks, this is not a tiny home. There is nothing tiny about this at all. You want a small one, you can get a small one, but there is nothing. This has the feel of a very nice home with some very nice finishes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert. Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you joining me. I know we did this pretty quick and got all this together pretty fast. But I always say this at the end. We've all built it the old way. Now let's just go build it better. Thanks for joining us, Arden.
Thank you very much for your time, Robert.